just leave it here? Good morning. Now that most of you have found your seats, I'm going to ask that you all stand and join me in the flag salute, followed by the invocation. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can you cut the music, please? Oh, that's outside. Okay. A little background to the prayer. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you this morning and we praise your name and adore you for what an awesome God you are, Lord. We recognize that we are sinners not worthy of your grace, and yet we receive it every day. We thank you for the opportunities you give us as family and friends to be part of this California dairy industry and all the blessings that brings unto us and that we're able to pass on to others. We ask now that you be with us throughout the rest of this meeting. We thank you for the work the economists have done on these quota proposals, Lord. Ask that you would bring unity among our industry. We ask that you would, everything we say and do would be honoring and glorifying to you. We pray for supplication, Lord, for those that are sick and suffering and grieving, and grant everyone safe travel later on today. Forgive our many sins in Christ's name. Amen. At this time, I'm going to introduce Dino.
Thanks, Travis. Let's see here. Can we go to the PowerPoint there? There we go. I'm going to advance. Okay. All right, thanks everybody for coming. I guess you're all over there, so we'll keep looking that way. But we are pleased that you have all come here today to participate or to hear about the results of the last several months of work and input from the industry and from people all over the place. The hard work of Dr. Bozic and Mr. Gould in order to try to find a solution or to find some common ground. I guess solution is not the right word, but some common ground around quota. And I want to start the meeting off today by saying a few thank yous. And the first thank you I want to give is to Western United Dairies for sponsoring the meeting today. We appreciate them. Next, I would like to thank and introduce the partners and the organizations that were responsible for the three-phase process that got us to the proposal that you're going to hear about this morning. And those are Dairy Farmers of America, Land O'Lakes, CDI, and also the Stop Quip organization. We also had a broad range of support from the three trade organizations in terms of communicating and participating in committees and on the technical side of what we were uncovering here. And I would like to thank once again Western United Dairies, Milk Producers Council, and California Dairy Campaign. Okay. So where we've come from up to this point is, last year, sometime in January, there was a meeting in Hanford at which many of you guys attended and participated in, where it was discussed whether there was a need to have a conversation around quota. And the United Dairy Families of California the organization was sort of bred out of that event. It became clear that there was still some division and some uncertainty, and people didn't really know what to make of everything. So a few guys got together and thought the best case scenario would be to organize and see what we could come up with. And what we came up with was this 5-phase process. We have been through phase 1, which we called the think tank, where there was an opportunity for every producer to come and share ideas about what could happen. And then in phase 2, we evaluated those ideas and we narrowed them down to 3, from 11 down to 3. And then in phase 3, which we called the analysis phase, we were able to get input from producers, and there was close to 180 surveys filled out in person at these meetings. And what the result of that is what you're about to see now. So what comes next, we will talk about a little bit more, but the next phase basically is achieving a consensus around the plan and then implementing that plan if it's what suits the industry. But before I go any further, I would like to introduce the Secretary of Agriculture, Karen Ross. Are you saying no, like you don't want to? We're not. Let's welcome Secretary Ross.
They want to hear your presentation. They don't want to hear from me.
Oh yeah, I'm done already.
You're not done. So because he knew I was next door, we're doing the state board meeting and I have to get back. But I did want to thank you all for being here today, and I wanted to thank you as dairy families for continuing this important conversation. I am not taking sides. I believe in your self-determination for the future of your industry. Dairy is an important part. It's the largest by gross value, but what you do in your local communities, what you are doing to help us address our environmental issues, what you do on a daily basis to feed and nourish our population is important. And I want you to know that we respect every legal right that you have, as well as what you are trying to do as an industry coming together to have difficult conversations and to exercise the processes that have been afforded to you. And we will do that with integrity, and we want you to continue this conversation. And I just want to thank you for the leadership Dino, you, and many others have done to keep people talking together about the future of your industry. Making this transition to the federal milk marketing order was a big challenge, and you have made that move, and prices are up, right, Greg? Jeff? Anybody? The last I heard, we were still seeing some progress. But what we need to do for the future of dairy and all of other agriculture is continue to invest in our industry to keep up with how fast technology is changing, how fast consumer trends are changing, and to keep up with where those export markets are in addition to what we can do domestically to make sure that we keep the dairy sector of American agriculture, and especially California agriculture, healthy and profitable and here for the next 150 years or longer, right? But I don't know if the cows will last that long. No, just making a really bad joke. So thank you for being here. Thank you for working together to find this consensus within your industry. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Madam Secretary. So my cows only lasted 126 years in California, and we'll see how it goes for the rest of you. Hopefully, we can get this behind and do something that makes the industry prosperous for a long time. But I just want to go back real quick to the slides and just suggest that in the agenda today, there's going to be more talk about the future and what plans are next. I don't want to go through that right now, but at this point, I would like to introduce Rob Vanden Heuvel to give some comments from the coalition that worked on the process.
Good morning. Thank you for coming out this morning. I'm Rob Vanden Heuvel with California Dairies Inc. And really on behalf of the committee that advised and guided Marin and Matt in this process, which was Dino and his folks at UDSC, the folks at Stop Quip, and then the 3 co-ops, CDI, DFA, and Land O'Lakes. The co-ops are coming into this realizing that we've got memberships with a broad variety of perspectives on this issue of quota. And so where we came into this is we wanted to facilitate a process. We wanted to give the producers an opportunity to weigh in a structured way that was very open. And Dino presented this idea with UDFC and their 5-phase process, and that seemed to make a lot of sense. And so that's really what our driving force has been. We don't have an outcome that we have endorsed at the co-op level. We've been about the producers self-determining, like the secretary said. And so, I'd encourage you to really listen to what Marin's put together today. These are not his emotional findings. These are based on real work that he's done that many of you have participated in the various meetings over the past 9 months, trying to find what is that middle ground. And if some of the early conversations I've had are any indication, neither side loves it, which tells me there's probably some real truth in this being a middle ground. And so I really encourage you to listen, not just to what Marin's proposing, but why, what led to this proposal, what was the feedback he got that leads him to believe this is our best shot at finding a middle ground. So with that, I'd pass it back to Dino.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, I should also mention, and I meant to do this earlier. This is not Dino's thing up here, this United Dairy Families of California. This organization was founded by a group of people who really stuck it out there. Throughout this entire process, this thing has been incredibly emotional, very challenging for people to talk about it. Every organization felt like, they were conflicted and couldn't participate. And the 12 guys that have been, working this thing and making it go all this time really personally sacrificed. And I think it's important that each of them is recognized. So I just want to read off their names to you right now. We have Lucas Denise, Arlen Van Groningen, Dominic Asali, Chino Pedretti, Travis Camper, Roger Flugel, Raymond Echeverria, Sean Tolinar, Will Dite, and Xavier Avila. And we also have Sean Nicholson as a participant, and if I miss somebody, I apologize. And if any of you guys are here, stand up. I want people to see your head so they can shoot at you. They're not going to stand up. So they're brave online, but they're not brave in person, all right? So anyway, thank you to those guys for making this whole thing possible. Okay, and now I would like to introduce Anya.
As a brief introduction, my name is Anya Radaba. I'm the CEO of Western United Dairies. I want to thank everyone for coming today. Western's role in this process has been to elevate every dairy family's voice, which lent us to support a process that does that. And so I'm going to give you a few updates with respect to producer education and making sure that everyone is aware of all the facets of this moving project. So with respect to a lawsuit, Stop Quip has a lawsuit currently against CDFA, and the court has scheduled a hearing date for that on May 15th at 10 a.m. This is a hearing on the merits of Stop Quip's request for an order declaring that the quip is invalid. At the hearing and in written briefs to the court in the weeks before, Stop Quip and CDFA will present their respective arguments on the validity of the present quip. The parties may also submit evidence and any relevant facts to support their relevant positions. The Stop Quip's notice decision of the hearing indicates that they do not currently intend to present any witnesses. Besides, because the lawsuit focuses on a legal issue, that is, which procedural steps were required by the applicable statutes and regulations when CDFA adopted the quip, the court could decide the issue based on the briefs and oral argument at the hearing. As we advised before, it's our intention, Western intention, along with UDFC's, to submit something called an amicus curiae to the court, which is literally translated into friends of the court, and to provide different perspectives before the court during the hearing. One other thing Dino's asked me to present is a conversation about section and chapter 3.5. As you know, Stop Quip has recently submitted another petition to CDFA seeking to terminate the quip. In this petition, Stop Quip asks CDFA to immediately suspend Chapter 3.5 of the Gonzalez Milk Pooling Act Stop Quip also asserts that the suspension of Chapter 3.5 will cause the Quip to be terminated because the Quip was established purportedly pursuant to Chapter 3.5. In our knowledge, this is the first time this Chapter 3.5 petition has ever been submitted to the Secretary, so it is uncharted territory. What is Chapter 3.5? Chapter 3.5 came into effect on January 1st, 1994, and established the fixed differential for quota payments subject to RQAs. This reflected a change of the prior method of calculating quota payments, which resulted in the quota differential fluctuating from month to month. There were no changes to Chapter 3.5 until June 2017, when a new section was added to expressly authorize CDFA to establish a standalone quota program, also called the QUIP, in the event producers voted in favor of an FMMO. The basic purpose of Chapter 3.5 petition is that producers can petition to suspend Chapter 3.5, and when 3.5 was enacted in 1994, it was enacted by the legislature and not via a producer referendum. So the legislature included a process to put the continuation of the chapter to a referendum and give producers a way out of the new fixed differential. The referendum requirements are lower than those in other chapters of the Gonzales Milk Pooling Act. According to the code, Chapter 3.5 will remain in place if at least 51% of the producers vote, and at least 51% of those voting and producing at least 51% of the state's milk vote to keep Chapter 3.5. Or if 49.1% of producers either do not vote or vote no in such a referendum, Chapter 3.5 will be suspended. Why are the Chapter 3.5 referendum requirements important? The threshold referendum requirements for suspending Chapter 3.5 are lower than the requirements in Chapter 3 for terminating a plan that was voted into existence via referendum, like the QUIP. In contrast, the Chapter 3 referendum requirements set a higher threshold of 65% of producers representing 51% of the milk, or 51% of producers representing 65% of the milk under Chapter 3. Chapter 3 requires more producer support than a petition to suspend Chapter 3.5. Okay. You can leave me up there. Thank you for listening.
Sorry about the short introduction, Anya, but you know they say the more famous somebody is, the shorter introduction you have to do, like, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, that's it, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, Anya. Okay, so I think we're at a point in the program where we're going to bring Marin up. But first, can I ask you guys, is it possible to keep the PowerPoint always in the monitor while showing the presenter on the screen, or it's one or the other? One or the other, okay. Well, let's bring the PowerPoint up then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Marin Bozic.
Good morning, everyone. It's been a privilege of my life to serve you over the last 8 months. I put everything I knew into this, except the clicker. Dina took the clicker. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, thank you, Dina. I put everything I knew into this. You know, we work assiduously to deliver outcomes that we can sign our names under and to prune them of any biases that we could possibly have. Just like Secretary Matt Gould and I did not take sides. We let you speak, and the plan that we present today is your plan. It's not my plan, it's not Matt's plan, it's not CDI's or Dino's plan, it's your plan. It's based strictly on the surveys. So the plan is simple. It fits on a single slide. It's a 5-year sunset plus equalizing RQAs. It would be trivial if we don't tell you the story of how we got to here. The process going from think tank to 11 ideas to 3 ideas to one single plan in the end. And then Matt will do that part. After we evaluate how we got from 11 to 3 ideas, I will come back on stage and I will walk you through detail of final deliberations based on the surveys that we conducted on January 6 through 8. I will wrap up After I present how we got to the plan, I will wrap up by the analysis of risk and how this proposal resolves that risk. It allows the industry to move forward. And also I will offer a story, a few principles that can maybe help you make up your mind whether this is a right thing to do or not. I will not tell you what to do. I will offer you some principles to contemplate on. And then I understand we'll have a Q&A and we'll be here until all your questions are answered. So we will start by Matt Gould taking us through the process of arriving to the final plan.
Thanks. Thank you all for being here, and thanks, Maren. Before I get going talking about the three phases and where we're at, which is going to lead up to what Maren's deep description of the last survey's findings and ultimately the choice from the industry and what to do about quota, I want to say thanks to all of you, and I want to explain why. Quota has been an issue, or has been in existence for decades, multiple generations. Most recently, it's become an issue that has split families, that has damaged friendships, that has pitted dairy farmers against dairy farmers. It's a highly emotional issue, and it's also one that's been polarizing. And in this day and age, the way that we typically deal with these types of issues is instead of trying to understand the problems, we go and we attack one another, or we use rhetoric to try to make the divisions bigger. And I think the industry has done something really special here, in that you all have actively chosen a different path. Instead of attacking one another, you decided to go and pursue truth. And you sought out and searched for the facts. You empathized with the other side, all in an attempt to reach a consensus. And I really think that that's something special. It's something that I think our own industry will in the future seek to replicate regardless of the outcome, in that we tried to use truth as an industry to find a path forward. So I want to thank you for the honor of being involved in that process, but I also think that it's worth reflecting on how kind of progressive that is in this day and age. So with that, I'm going to go through the three stages that we've completed so far. We first had a think tank phase where the theme was any idea is a good idea. In total, we received 1,200 note cards from producers. I tabulated all of those up, and then we took those 1,200 note cards and categorized them into 11 ideas. Then we came back out to California, and we conducted producer surveys to take those 11 ideas and trim them down to 3. At that phase, we got just under 20% of the industry. I think on this slide it says 15.8. It's actually 18.7. That's a mistake. And then, once we got down to 3, we came back out, and the industry went back at it, and we had hundreds of people who had record attendance in the final meetings to go from 3 to 1. And Maren's going to talk about that in detail. For producers that either didn't attend some of the meetings or had people show up in their place, I want to review and kind of provide the Spark Notes versions of the meetings leading up to the final one, so that you can kind of understand how we got to where we are today. So this was a slide that was presented at the first meeting. At that time, quota values had decreased from about $500 to $300. And the Stop Quit petition had started to circulate, and that's why prices decreased. And so you say, why are we together? Why did everyone come out? Why did hundreds of people come out? Well, we saw quota prices decrease. And then the next slide that we showed is we put up this slide. And this slide is Dr. Bozic and my assessment of the percentage of California's dairy industry that are cash flow negative from the quota program. What that means is this is the percentage of California's dairy industry that is being deducted on their milk checks. And you can see that we've been going from 1995, we're rising, And we clearly are above the 50% threshold, so more than half of the industry is cash flow negative from the quota program, and we're right now somewhere around that 2/3 mark. And there's some important takeaways from this slide, which is why I'm representing it. The first is that under Chapter 3, you need to have 25% of the industry sign a petition in order for that petition to go to call for a hearing. We have clearly exceeded 25% of the industry that is cash flow negative from QIP. What that means is that going forward, if there's a petition to terminate QIP, it's likely that even if that fails, there'll be another petition that comes up behind it. So that was kind of one of the first facts that we started off the meeting with that we wanted people to think about. And then the second is that we're very close to having 2/3 of the industry be cash flow negative from QIP. And under the Chapter 3, if 2/3 of the industry were to vote their cash flows, and it's unclear who would win a referendum if you sought to terminate, whether it would stay or whether it would go. And so then we presented this slide and said, well, so these conditions, the fact that it's not clear who would win, but we do know petitions will continue. And so that kind of brought us into the room. That's why hundreds of people showed up to each set of our meetings. And then we presented this slide. And here are your choices. If you are someone who is cash flow negative from QIP, so you have no quota, you can do nothing and continue paying assessments. You can try and petition for a referendum, which it's not clear that you will win. Or you can go and pursue a consensus solution. On the other side, if you are a high quota owner, say 100% of your milk is covered by quota, your choices are to do nothing and hope that a termination referendum does not pass, or to come together and try to reach a consensus solution. And so that's what this process has been about, is that middle ground. What does a consensus look like? Is it even possible? I mean, originally it was, is it even possible to have a consensus? And now we have a solution that Dr. Bozic will present as best as we can tell is the consensus solution. But notice it's an alternative to doing nothing, and it's an alternative to termination, both of which are on the table as well today, outside of this process. So now I'm going to go through kind of each phase. This is the 1,200 producer responses added up to a little over 10,000 words. The phase 1 meetings, any idea was a good idea, and we received broad industry support. We took those 1,200 comments and categorized them, and what it resulted in was 11 different proposals. Of those, 3 would keep quota in indefinitely, 6 were different forms of termination, and 2 were kind of outside the box ideas that didn't quite fit into those other 2 categories. We then, at the end of so then we took those ideas, we came back out to California. We were in Tulare, or Chino, Tulare, and Turlock, and we presented them to producers. We had 137 completed producer surveys. It was just under 20% of the state's dairy industry. Those were intense meetings going through 11 ideas. For those of you in attendance that were at those meetings, they were 3 hours long. The industry engaged. They got informed, and we surveyed them. The survey of respondents looked very similar to the California dairy industry, and we got the responses. There were some ideas that were easily eliminated. For example, we proposed giving longer sunsets to the Chino area and Petaluma area. Got basically no support. There were some ideas that received a lot of support. The basic sunset, tying quota payments to Class 1 sales, for example. One of the big takeaways, though, is there was no idea that received more than 50% support, let alone 2/3 support. So we had to trim from 11 ideas down to 3, and based off the producer surveys, we did. And what we were left was with 3 ideas, 1 that kept quota in place indefinitely, tying quota payments to Class 1 sales, and then 2 which were forms of termination, a sunset and a buyout. The other ideas were then eliminated. We came back out to California, and we surveyed producers again. These meetings were shorter. We had just under a third of California's dairy industry participate. We had 173 producer surveys completed, and the result was what Marin's going to discuss. The one thing I want to note is that when we surveyed the industry the first time to go from 11 ideas to 3, we had surveys that looked very much like participation that looked very much like the California dairy industry. We had slight overrepresentation of quota holders and slight underrepresentation of people that own no quota, but it looked very similar. When we did the survey the last time, we ended up getting terrific turnout among producers that had high amounts of quota. So as Dr. Bozic will go through in the analysis, is we looked at the data in 2 different ways, just it in its raw form, and then also weighted to readjust for the voter turnouts. So with that, I'll hand it off to Marin.
Can we have the slides up? So the phase 3, we were down to 3 ideas, 3 finalists. The first one was to tie quota premiums to Class 1 sales. What would that mean? First, it would keep QIP in place indefinitely. So we did not prejudicate that the QIP has to go away. There was a reform option that would keep QIP in forever. What would that look like? Quota premiums, so payments that owners of quota would receive, would be $1.09 per hundredweight, the same across the state. Quota assessments would be reduced to 26 cents per hundred, and quota premiums would then be revised annually based on Class 1 sales. So if Class 1 sales go down, then the premiums would go down, the quota payments would go down, and the assessments would go down. If, for example, we have a rebound of Class 1 sales, or we start exporting a lot of fluid milk to China, overseas, etc., that would increase the quota premiums, it would increase the assessments because the benefits of fluid milk to the industry would also be higher in that case. This problem resolves the fixed differential without having volatile swings up and down that we had in the early 90s, so the problem that led to the fixed differential, right? And it also serves to provide for long-term legitimacy of the program. There was a danger that if you keep the program as is over next decade and 10 years from now, the fluid milk is much lower than today, that the fixed differential can be something that would be challenged either through Chapter 3.5 petition or other means. This program would resolve that problem, this reform option. The second option was the sunset. We offered 5 different versions of the sunset: 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 and 7 years. So that would be March 2023, March 2024, 2025, etc. And we offered 2 flavors of the sunset, either with equalized RQAs or leaving RQAs as they are currently. And then finally, the third finalist option was the buyout. Buyout was similar to the sunset in terms of the duration, but everybody who owns quota would get would get a lump sum payment in January 2021 in return for their quota certificates. The buyout prices also varied. We offered 5 choices, just like the sunset. And they varied from $179 all the way up to $384 per pound. And what was particularly important with buyout is that we made them easily comparable with the sunset, in such way that a producer who owns no quota would be as indifferent as possible between a particular buyout and a 5-year sunset, because it's the same amount of money that he or she would pay over 5 years for assessments. So buyout was really, can be seen as an add-on to the sunset to provide additional benefit to quota holders. So those were the 3 finalist options. The question that we asked at the end of the meeting, after producers had a chance to be informed about each of these three options in full detail, so at the very end of the meeting, we asked several questions. The first one was, which of these three plans is the best for your business? So looking from your own economics, of your own farm. And what you see here are three ideas from left to right, tying quota payments to Class 1 sales. Middle one is the sunset, and then the right one is the buyout. Green means that people thought that was the best idea. Red means that they thought it was the worst idea of the three. And you can see here that the tying quota payments to Class 1 sales was by far the worst, or clearly the worst of these three ideas that we presented. We can discuss sunset versus buyout in a little bit in further detail, but the tying quota payments to Class 1 sales is clearly ranked the third. This is the same distribution, but this time weighted by milk cows. So producers who indicated they have more milk cows were weighted more in this particular slide. And you can see that when you weigh the results by milk cows, it's even clearer that tying quota payments to Class 1 sales is a no-go. We asked before in the survey, we asked several questions regarding this plan. Is it easy to understand? Oh yeah. Most people found it very easy to understand Class 1, tying quota premiums to Class 1 sales. That's not the reason why they ranked it the last one. So what was the reason? We believe that the reason was that there was lack of confidence that tying quota premiums to Class 1 sales would stabilize QIP. There seemed to be a widespread belief that just modifying the way the quota premiums are calculating and tying it to Class 1 sales would do nothing to stop the challenges that we are seeing these days in forms of petitions and lawsuits, etc. So that is, in my opinion, the main reason why tying quota premiums to Class 1 sales did not rise to the top. We also asked the question, which plan is most likely to generate a supermajority, so a consensus? And you can see here that sunset is more preferred to the buyout. It has a higher green bar, dark green bar. Same thing when we weighed by the milk cows. We have sunset about quarter, about 25% more preferred than the buyout in terms of perceived likelihood to generate a supermajority. We asked then individually for every of these three proposals, so not to rank them, but on its own, do you find this proposal acceptable? So without going into details, but as a concept, do you find it acceptable? So for example, for sunset, some of you may have found 3 years acceptable and nothing more. Others found 7 years acceptable and nothing less. But this question was, as a concept, do you find it acceptable? And tying quota premiums to Class 1 sales was acceptable to 60% of respondents who own 57% of cows. But when we corrected for the fact that the part of the room was empty, if you will, that we did not have enough of producers who own no quota, when we corrected for that using scientific methods, what we found is that less than half of all milk solids in California would find this particular idea acceptable. So this idea is not acceptable to the industry. We asked the same question about the sunset. And oh boy, sunset is acceptable by acclamation, almost universally. 79% of all survey respondents said yes, sunset is acceptable. They own 84% of the milk cows that were among those that were at the meetings. And when you correct for over and under representation of different quota ownership groups, when you try to make the results perfectly reflect the will of the industry, not just the participants in the phase 3 meetings, we find that 88% of California milk solids finds the sunset as a concept acceptable. The same cannot be said for the buyout. For the buyout, we have only 64% of California milk solids finding it acceptable. Remember, if everybody comes out to vote on a referendum, we need 65% of milk solids to vote yes for something. So buyout gives us a very, very slim margin of error there. In fact, based on this, it would be questionable whether that can pass the 65% majority of milk solids. The next question we asked about the sunset was, here are 5 different durations: 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6, and 7. We asked people, in your opinion, how long does the sunset have to be so that it's fair both to quota holders, to those that own quota, and to producers that do not own any quota? And what you see, the results here are grouped by how much milk has a respondent covered by quota. So among all the people that own no quota, that would be the first blue bar at 3 years and 3.7 years. On the other side of the spectrum, producers that have more than 3/4 of their milk covered by quota, up to 100%, well, in their opinion, it's 6.6 years. It is natural that one's own position in this situation would reflect what they believe is fair. When we took the average of the entire industry, it was 5 years and 25 days. This is just about exactly right as it is from today through March 1, 2025, which is what we have in the final plan. Those producers that are about cash flow neutral from the program, so they have, on their balance sheets, they have quota listed as an asset, but month to month, they don't really see a substantial cash flow one way or another. That would be perhaps this group from 21 to 25% or 16 to 20%. They are right there in 5 years. In fact, once you get anything above 0, even if you have 1 pound of quota, you're much closer to 5 years than the strict 0 quota guys. You see that four bars in a row are very, very close to 5 years. And the weighted average across everyone, reflecting the entire industry, is 5 years and 25 days, or in decimals, it would be 5.07. So I just converted it to days for you. The next question is, who can we get to vote for a plan that we propose? Whose support can we expect? And the way we asked you that, we gave you 5 different questions, 5 different sunset durations, and then we asked you, okay, 3 years. Would you vote yes on a plan? Would you vote definitely no on that plan? Or maybe you're just not sure, but can be persuaded either way. So what I'm presenting here is how many producers said either yes or I can be persuaded. Not surprisingly, if we have a sunset of only 3 years, almost all producers that own no quota would definitely vote yes on it, or at least can be persuaded. When then sunset goes from 3 years to 4 years, we lose about 10% of them. When we go from 4 years to 5 years, we are down to 30% of producers who own no quota, who expressed in this survey that they would either vote yes or can be persuaded to vote yes. Now let's take a look how the same chart looks like for the other group. So by the way, if we go beyond 5 years, we'll lose this group completely, down to 0. Or maybe there's one of them that would vote, probably Craig Gordon. So, just kidding. Okay, so, are you there, Craig? Hey, hey, buddy. All right. So then we asked the same question. We asked the same question to everyone. We asked the question to those that have more than 3/4 of their milk covered by quota. 3 years, we don't have any of them. Less than about 10%. 4 years, it jumps to 20. 5 years, it jumps. You see how a big jump it is from 4 to 5 years? Half of them. And then, of course, at 7 years, almost all of them would be willing to support the sunset plan. So let's put these lines together in a cross, if you will. And I'm going to put all the quota ownership categories there. We don't have a lot of producers between 1 and 15%, so the orange line can be discounted. It's rather uncommon. It doesn't follow the pattern. Where do these lines cross? Do you see it? They cross at 5 years. So 5 years is, among these 5 choices, the duration that offers the most balanced support across all quota ownership categories, from those that own no quota to those that own 100% of quota. So when we talk about 5 years, it's not me jumping on a call with 4 people and sort of playing an intermediary and just sort of pulling it out of thin air. It's your answers. This is what the survey said. When you look at across these 5 sunset durations, how many people said that they are not sure but can be persuaded? Notice the huge jump when you go from 4 years to 5 years. If you're at 4 years, people have basically made up their mind. But when you get to, because some are definite yes, some are definite no. But when you're at 5 years, many more are unsure. They're open to be persuaded. You see the jump there from 4 years to 5 years. Unfortunately, I cannot use my laser pointer because the screen is positioned in front of the stage. And here's a difficult chart to process. Absolutely no sunset, 3 years, 4, 5, 6, or 7. No sunset today would generate 65% of milk solids. All of them are somewhere between 50 and 60% of milk solids among those that would vote yes or can be persuaded. There are 2 ways you can read this. First, we are done, we can all go home, we have been defeated. Second, which I believe is more appropriate way to interpret this, is that once we coalesce to the plan, those that would like to see the plan pass have to talk with their neighbors, inform them, have discussions, have the coffee table discussions, and I do believe that we can get from 50, 55% to 65, 70, maybe 75% milk solids. I know for sure that some of the answers on the survey have been strategic. What do I mean by that? Well, you know that this is not Bozick's academic research that's going to be published in Journal of Dairy Science, and who the hell cares, right? You know that I'm going to take these results and present a plan that affects your financial future. So you have the incentive to maybe skew it a little bit to your side. For some of them, it means closer to 3 years. For others, it means closer to 7 years. I had producers calling me days before these meetings, and they said, well, what should I put there? And they actually, the reasoning that I just offered you, they offered to me over the phone. I'm not going to name names. So I really do believe that we are closer to 5 years than the survey results indicate because of the incentive to be strategic in survey answers. And we are not that far. We are not that far. We just need about 10% milk solids more and 10 to 12% milk solids more, and we will be above the thresholds. So that's the sunset story. The next question was regional quota adjusters. And I'll be honest, as a political junkie of kind, like my first instinct was don't touch RQAs, because whenever you try to build a political coalition in Washington, D.C., how do? You take a little bit from everyone, you give a lot to few, you get the votes you need to break the filibuster, right? That's the pork barrel politics. I did not expect the vote to turn this way, but I was faithful to your answers, and that's why it made it to the plan. And the answers are fascinating to me. The question, which one do you prefer? We have a slight preference for equalizing RQA. We asked 2 more questions. Which one do you think is more fair? You can see that 78 producers said that equalizing RQA is more fair, even though 72 producers only prefer it that way. 56 producers in the survey would prefer to keep RQAs as they are, but 6 among them said, even though I would personally prefer it this way, I believe it's more fair if we equalize them. And we asked the third question, which one is more likely to generate a consensus? Even more piled on to they should be equalized. So this part of the final plan to equalize RQA is true reflection of your preferences. And in retrospect, I believe I understand what's going on. If we are going to do something that's painful, we want to feel that we are doing it out of good principles, not just based on my own wallet or my own risk. So I truly, truly admire and respect this vote that you put forward, and in particularly that the support for consensus and fairness is even stronger than individual economic preferences. I truly admire that. So, and you can see that across zones. It's not just Tulare. In 4 out of 5 zones, on the question of what helps bring about a consensus, equalizing RQAs wins. So it's a broad support across almost the entire state. Even in Zone 1, it's almost balanced. So the next question was, do we go with a sunset or a buyout? And there are really 2 groups of folks there. The zero quota guys very, very, very strongly prefer the sunset. There's absolutely no upside in buyout for them, right? I mean, think about it. People that take the money January 2021, they may exit the industry sooner than otherwise, and everybody else is left paying the assessments. You go to Sacramento, things go wrong, and we are, we have something else that we need to do that nobody anticipated. So they very strongly, those are their reasons that they offered to me in anecdotal conversations. So they very strongly oppose the buyout, or prefer the sunset, I should say. So then the only strong reason to go with the buyout would be if quota holders as a group have a very, very strong preference for the buyout. But the survey uncovered that that is not the case. In aggregate, across all the producers that own quota, no matter how little or how much, only 50% of them would support the buyout over the sunset. So it's basically a split vote. Who supports the buyout the most? Those whose cash flow is pretty neutral, but that derive a lot of asset value from the program. Presumably some of them are thinking, okay, well, if I have the buyout and I get the money, I can retire a little bit earlier, and that's my retirement. So you see the 70% support for the buyout in the groups that have 26% to 40% of milk covered by quota, but for groups that have more milk covered by quota, it starts to drop down. So basically, there wasn't support for the buyout. There just was not enough support to add buyout on top of the sunset. In fact, when we looked at the 5-year sunset and we compared that particular duration to the buyout, only 40% of respondents who own quota said that they would prefer a buyout to a 5-year sunset. We should take that with a grain of salt because we did not ask for an equalized RQA sunset versus buyout. We asked for a simple sunset. I frankly did not anticipate that you will want to equalize RQA, so there was a little bit ambiguity there in how we understand these results. But overall, there was no strong appetite for the buyout, or at least strong enough that would warrant me coming back to my advisory board, your advisory board, and saying, guys, we need to run another survey. It looks like we are on a threshold, we need to refine this and ask one more time. There was not enough evidence to warrant another round of surveys. One advantage of buyout, at least in theory, was that you can spread the payback out and lower the assessments. So we did ask people about it. Okay, if we do have a buyout, would you like to keep the assessments at 35 cents or bring them down to 30 or 26 cents and then take 1 more year to pay it back or 2 more years to pay back the bond? And it's a split vote. There is no consensus in the industry that the buyout is a useful vehicle because it allows us to immediately drop the assessment and stretch the payback out. Some people would want that, others just want to pay it and be done with it as soon as possible. So that wasn't the reason to go with the buyout either. Finally, the question I asked is, can buyout help us increase the coalition for a 5-year plan? You could imagine that we could maybe have some quota holders who would not find the 5-year sunset acceptable at all, but would be willing to vote for that plan if it was a 5-year sunset equivalent buyout. And what it turns out that we lose as many producers as we gain by putting buyout on top of the sunset. Now, these are admittedly very thin results. This is now drilling very deep into data, so we don't have a lot of producers. So take this with a grain of salt or a bucket of salt, this particular slide. But in general, whichever way I sliced the data, I just could not find enough support that would justify the buyout. Therefore, sunset. Okay, so distilling the producer preferences, here's what we find. Tying quota premiums to Class 1 sales, easy to understand. People don't believe it will stabilize the quota. Least popular of the 3 final options, eliminated. Sunset, almost universally accepted as a concept. Average duration after correcting for sampling biases, average duration 5.07 years. That's 5 years and 25 days. And 5 years is the only duration that has balanced support across all quota ownership categories. And finally, regarding sunset, producers do believe that equalizing RQA is fair and will help with consensus building towards the implementation. With buyout, strong oppositions by producers who own no quota, and quota holders are divided. Does not help to widen the coalition relative to sunset. Put all of this together, and this is the outcome. This is the technical language that would be used to amend the quota implementation plan. This is the entire plan. It's 3 sentences long. Article 8 on regional quota adjuster. Basically, all the zones would get the adjuster of negative 27 cents, which is what you need to get to the quota premium of $1.43 that producers in this county, in Tulare County, enjoy currently. That's the first part. And then Article 11, the plan shall remain in effect until March 1, 2025. Effective March 1, 2025, the plan shall be terminated. That's it. So this entire process was distilled into this final plan now presented for your consideration. So in the remainder of my talk, I want to do 2 more things. I first want to walk again through the risks that the current situation presents to you, whether you're a quota holder or you own no quota. And I want to offer some opinions how this final plan helps resolve that risk. And then later I want to talk a little bit about principles. So first, let's talk about the lawsuit. The claim is, in the lawsuit, that CDFA had to hold a formal public hearing prior to implementing the QIP. But the claim is they skipped that step, and therefore, court is asked to declare that the QIP is, and I quote from the lawsuit, invalid, illegal, void, and of no effect. It's a very stark statement. CDFA response, everything was done properly. They wrote it on 7 pages, number of reasons, but the summary is, in CDFA's opinion, everything was done properly. Next step is that on May 15th, 2020, so just 3 months from now, there will be a court hearing at 10 o'clock in the morning where the arguments will be presented for and against this argument, this claim. How does the consensus plan resolve this risk? Well, in my opinion, and keep in mind, I'm not an attorney. In my opinion, the consensus plan could render this lawsuit moot in several different ways. First, if we do have a plan that offers certainty over the next 5 years, some of the funders of the lawsuit may say this is good enough for me, I'm no longer going to fund the lawsuit. Keep in mind, attorneys charge much more per hour than economists, so there's an incentive there to sort of drop the lawsuit if you got the plan that you can live with. And then second, and again, I'm not an attorney, just my own personal opinion, you limit the risk. You potentially limit the risk. The department could potentially use the events that will happen over the next 6 to 9 months or however to inoculate the QIP from the point of amendment onward from anything that the lawsuit claims to be afflicting the current plan. And again, for the third time, I'm not an attorney. This is just my economist opinion here. So it could resolve this. This risk could indeed be reduced by the lawsuit. And I'm making absolutely no statements about the validity of the claim. I am not a friend of the court, or I'm not supporting either side. I'm giving you facts as straight as I could possibly do as a neutral third-party observer. In some sense, this lawsuit is a black swan of the process. It came out of nowhere in November of 2019. From what I understand, so this is a story how I'm in Salt Lake City Airport waiting for a connecting flight to Minneapolis. It's January 8th, I believe, at the end of the Phase 3 meetings. Just as I was about to board, my phone rings, and it's Chip English. I appreciate Chip a lot. He's a famous attorney, but we are not house friends. He never called me before. So I'm like, hey, Chip, what's up? He says, I want to read you something. And he reads me verbatim the letter that he just received from the Deputy Attorney General, which can be summarized in, we're going to do the public hearing. Like, we're going to settle. That is not consistent with what we've seen the department do after that day. I have no reason to doubt the veracity of Chip's beliefs at that point in time. I'm using them to emphasize to you that this is not a trivial matter. This lawsuit is something that you should keep in mind as you evaluate whether you will support this plan or not. Okay, let's move on. Risk number 2, petition to affirm Chapter 3.5. Now, this is another black swan, if you will. The Chapter 3.5, as Anya well summarized, was introduced in the 1990s as a vehicle to implement the fixed differential. And the deal was, okay, guys, you didn't vote for this in a referendum. You didn't vote to put in 170, so we'll give you an exit door, an easy exit door back to the variable differential, in case you don't like it at some point down the road. And now, folks are knocking on that exit door, asking to leave the QIP rather than the fixed differential. And from what we've heard from Donald Shipplehood, Mr. Donald Shipplehood, in November at the Phase 2 meetings, it is CDFA's position that the department has the discretion how to address the petition. Again, not my claim, not my reading of the chapter. I'm summarizing Mr. Shipplehood's words to you. Would the referendum pass? Would the referendum lead to terminating QIP if it is put to a vote? Based on the statistics, I can only answer extremely likely. It is extremely likely that if this petition does lead to a referendum, the QIP would indeed be terminated. That's based on the data that Matt summarized for you. Petition was filed on January 29th, 2020, 353 signatures, which is, by the way, the same number as Japanese aircraft attacking Pearl Harbor. Little nerdy side note, my son and I were watching Midway the other day, so I know a bunch of stuff that I never really cared to know. Okay, so how does the consensus plan resolve this risk? When the 5-year plan passes, it is reasonable to expect that such vote would be perceived as a sufficient redress to stop QIP grievances that prompted this petition. in any number of ways. I am not going to suggest here what Secretary may or may not do. That is within her discretion. But it is at least conceivable that one of the scenarios that we could see in 2020 is that nothing happens with 3.5 until you guys have a chance to vote on the outcome of your self-determination process, which is the proposal that I presented today. And then her decision on the 3.5 petition may be contingent on the outcome of the vote on the consensus plan. That's one of many scenarios that may happen. But I do believe that if we do pass the consensus plan, that is going to be the plan, and that we are going to see QIP be here for the next 5 years. There's another element to that, however. The vote is not a block vote. Every one of you will have an individual ballot, and you will cast your vote in the privacy of your home or your business, the way you find it right thing to do for where you stand in this. And the department will protect your privacy of your vote. And the department protects the privacy of your milk production data. If I were to write to the department and say, give me the names of all the producers and how much milk they made last month, they will say, no way. That's private data. You don't have the right to do that. You don't have the right to get that. But if I asked milk production data by quota category, so the aggregate among those that own no quota, aggregate among those that own 1 to 10% quota, etc., they will happily provide that data to me because it anonymizes private information while providing insight as to the structure of the industry. When we have a vote for the President of the United States, the only thing that matters in California is the popular vote within California, if you will, right? You get electoral votes based on that. Still, all news outlets will report county by county how each county votes for which presidential candidate. That helps the transparency. That helps inform future decisions. My recommendation to the department is to publish the results of this plan, the 5-year sunset plan, by the quota ownership category. I believe it will pass. In case I'm wrong, I would like to know why it failed. Did it fail because the 0 guys didn't vote for it? Or did it fail because the quota holders did not vote for it? Which group of producers failed to support the plan? I think it matters. Lady Justice keeps the scale in balance, but she carries the sword in the other hand. Today, you're hoping that the secretary, if you're a quota holder, you're hoping that the secretary will prefer this plan over 3.5 petition. What will you say tomorrow or next year if the consensus plan fails to generate a vote? Think about that. Risk number 3, the petition to terminate QIP per Chapter 3.0. Okay, so this one is harder to pass. You need 65% of milk solids among those that did vote. And Matt took us through the math. It's getting more and more likely over time. How does the consensus plan resolve this risk? Long story short, if this passes, finding 65% milk solids to overturn it will, in my opinion, be an impossibility. So this consensus plan, in my opinion, inoculates you against any future Chapter 3.0 petitions, at least for the next 5 years, and that's the duration of the plan. This is what they call in risk literature a gray rhino. So you heard about black swan. I presented black swan is something that happens suddenly, nobody saw it coming, and it just wreaks havoc. Well, gray rhino is the type of the risk that you see coming from a mile away. First is a gray little dot, and then coming closer and closer and closer. And if you keep standing in the middle of the road, rather than do something about it, it's going to run you over. Don't neglect this risk. I know that at least some producers are thinking, well, okay, Stop QIP put in the first petition, it got invalidated. Then they thought they'll do the 3.5, and it took them 6 months. And then they told us that the lawsuit is going to be done quickly, and the department will settle, and now the department is fighting. So 3 strikes out. It's not a reasonable way to think about this. This risk is here to stay, and the only way you address this gray rhino is by passing a consensus plan. So the consensus plan at least reduces the risk from lawsuit, in my opinion. It reduces the risk from 3.5 petition, in my opinion, and it reduces, almost eliminates the risk from 3.0 petition, again, in my opinion. I do want to say that when I say I'm not claiming ownership over something that Matt and I did together. I'm emphasizing the personal pronoun to make sure that the buck stops with me, because I am the senior economist, if you will. So the responsibility ultimately stops with me for the words that we say on the stage. Okay, so that's the story of risk. I do also need to tell you the story of principles. You know, I have been advised not to go there. And I've struggled with this part a lot. The last thing I want to do is come across as pontificating. So please, next few slides, take it as coming from my heart to do you well, to help you make an informed decision, not to pontificate from the stage. It's a pretty tall stage. I've given 150 public talks over the last 10 years. This next few slides are probably the most difficult for me to deliver across all of them. But I do believe that they need to be said. So I want to walk you through why I think the story behind the 5-year plan is compelling. And then you can decide whether you feel it's a right thing to do or not. First, let's talk about the Gonsalves Milk Pooling Act. When you read the act, and by the way, June 1, 2019, I knew nothing about this. We came in with, as blank, open mind as possible once Dino called us to start looking into this. So this is as close as you can get an unbiased side observer looking at your industry, commenting on something that affects you. So when you read the Gonsalves Milk Pooling Act, this is Chapter 3.0. The quota, the milk pooling, and therefore quota, is justified based on protecting the health and welfare of the people of this state, California. And it goes on to say that fluid milk and fluid cream are necessary food for human consumption, that production and maintenance of adequate supply of healthful milk is vital to public health and welfare, and that bad practices that existed in the fluid milk sector in California at that time constitute a menace to the health and welfare of the inhabitants of this state. And therefore, they're going to use the police powers of the state. You don't get more stark than that. Police powers of the state to enforce milk pooling, to enforce quota and assessments on quota. Implicit at that time, explicit today. Well, here's the deal. Once you pass the federal marketing order, you get the same language in the federal marketing order. Orderly marketing, adequate supply of nutritious fluid milk. Those are all the exactly same reasons why we have federal orders. The conclusion that I personally cannot escape is that the quota no longer contributes to the original purpose of the Gonsalves Milk Pooling Act. It no longer has legitimacy. As hard as it is for me to say, and I know how difficult it is for many of you who have relied on quota for so many years, and for some of you it may constitute a good chunk of your balance sheet. I cannot escape this conclusion. Second, regional quota adjusters. They were basically there to reflect the value of fluid milk based on the distance to cities. And we can expand that, make it more academic. That's the core of the issue. Once we went from state order to federal order, we had location-specific class 1 differential. And therefore, regional quota adjusters also no longer contribute to their original purpose. And therefore, equalizing quota adjusters seem to be the right thing to do if you just follow the pure economic logic of why they were introduced in the first place. And then finally, why 5 years? Why not immediate termination? I think it's equally as important as these first two principles. When you read the QIP, there's a mention of a 5-year survey, a survey that will be conducted after 5 years of QIP. And the secretary shall put the termination referendum on vote if the plan no longer tends to effectuate the purpose. I've spoken with producers over the last few months who understood this particular language to mean 5 years of peace, at least 5 years of peace and stability and status quo before we have this conversation that we're having today. I don't believe that we would have federal order if producers were not promised a period of orderly transition if there should be a transition. So in our opinion, in my opinion, QIP was the promise to quota holders that if quota were to be terminated, it would happen through an orderly, consensus-based process. This is an orderly, consensus-based process that we've been engaged in over the last 7 months. I'm choosing my words very, very carefully because I want to make an argument that would be hard to counter. So the word that I have not used, let's talk about that one. But before I reveal that word, I want to show you something. So these are the annual returns on 3 months treasury bills, 30-year treasury bonds, high-quality corporate bonds, and basically investing in a stock market. Why are the returns on investing in the stock market higher than returns than lending money to the US government? Because it's more risky, right? If you bear more risk, you get compensated for that risk through higher annual returns. Here are the returns to quota over the last 22 years, 1995 through 2017, 16% return. And this is in Tulare, so conservative estimate, $60 a year in monthly payments. When I make the case for what seems to be a compelling story for the 5-year plan, I don't use the word compensation to quota holders because I believe there's a stronger argument to be made if we talk about socially sensitive way to do things. Compensation as a concept is prone to difficult debate because part of that compensation comes through the price of quota you pay for initially. It reflects the level of risk. If folks thought 20 years ago, if folks thought that quota was risk-free, its price would be probably over $1,000 per pound. They didn't. That's why you only had to pay about $500 or $400 or depending on the month. And that's why the return was so high. So yes, absolutely, compensation for quota, but guess what? You got it at the time when you bought it, even if you bought it 20 years ago, in terms of lower price. So there's a better argument to be made about the 5-year sunset. And the argument is to be socially sensitive. Immediate termination would wreak havoc on those producers who rely on quota to have monthly income that is higher than operating costs. It would lead to forced exits or rapid equity depletions and very, very difficult conversations between their bankers and dairymen. A 5-year sunset provides enough time to diversify, if that's your thing, to plan and execute expansion in the same site, if it's possible, or to relocate to a new location if you need to do that. You can do that within 5 years. Any one of these three, you can do that. Furthermore, for a producer which purchased quota just before the federal orders was initiated, that's October 2018, over 80% of their initial investment will be recouped by the time this sunset is done, will be recouped in form of monthly payments. And then finally, for those among you that plan to retire maybe this summer and that are looking to their quota holdings as a way to retire, as a retirement income, if we do pass this plan, I believe that the market price, so let's say that we pass this plan June 1, just for the sake of the argument. I believe that the price of quota this summer would be somewhere between $250 and $265 per pound, which is quite a bit more than it was in January, and right now it looks like the market is frozen. There were no trades for February. So it's a socially sensitive way to move forward. It's also a shared sacrifice. Yeah, we can talk about shared benefits, right? Shared benefits are easy. 3 cents less for everybody who pays assessments, and then $300 over the next 5 years for every pound of quota. Those are the shared benefits. Plus the stability, peace. You can actually move on, address other important issues that you have both in your personal lives and the lives of the industry. So much air was occupied by this quota. It's abhorrent. But let's talk about shared sacrifice. What is the sacrifice by producers that own no quota or have up to 20% of quota? $313 million over the next 5 years. That group will pay over $300 million to others for the sake of the peace, for the sake of the common plan. And they are 59% of milk solids, 6 out of 10 producers, and own only 10% of quota. What is the sacrifice of producers that have between 20 and 40% quota? Well, those are the guys that are not big on cash flow, ins or outs every month, but they have asset value in that quota. Their sacrifice is about $260 million worth of assets if we count the quota at $300 and everybody can offer their own dollar amounts. And I'm not saying that one is right, the other one is wrong. What I'm trying to say is that they're sacrificing their value, their assets. And then among those that have more than 40% of their milk covered by quota, their biggest sacrifice long-term is the permanent reduction in milk revenue that will run anywhere from 22 cents to $1.35 per hundred. So how would you know if I had presented you a plan that is doomed to fail? You would hear one side of the room doing high fives and applauding and doing standing ovation, and the other side of the room leaving. I see nobody clapping, and I see nobody leaving. We can do this. Finally, future challenges. And this is the most metaphysical, I guess, of all the principles. Was it 30 miles from here? There was an event just a week or two ago where a city won $65 million over nitrates. Dino's going to play a video right after I'm done here, where you will see where the conversation is taking us on animal rights. We have trade wars going on. We have ICE raids on our dairy farms across the nation. In each of these other issues, you want the conversation to be about what's fair and the right thing to do. You want the conversation to be about principles, not about the money that animal rights activists can generate to fight you. You want the conversation to be about principles and the fair and right thing to do. We have been cautioned about our most holy of books, most holy of scriptures, from days eternal. It goes all the way back to the thousands of years. We have been cautioned that as we do, so it will be done to us. As we sow, so shall we reap. The Bible says, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, you shall reap. If you make your decision based on what you believe is the fair and right thing to do, and you may disagree with what I presented, but if you make your vote based on what you believe is the fair and right thing to do, rather than just what benefits your wallet, you have a standing in all these future conversations. You have a rightful claim that whenever you're attacked on another issue, that you demand the conversation be done based on what's the fair and right thing to do. Not how much money the opponent has, not how much space they get from the mainstream media or others. Please keep that in mind as you decide your vote. Thank you very much.
Hey, Joe, cue the video, but don't start it yet. Thanks, Marin. We're going to get to Q&A here just in a quick second. And I first want to thank you guys all for sticking it out. I know there's a lot of information, but it's been a very long and complicated process. and I believe it deserves, the time it takes to present it. And to sort of punctuate, I'm supposed to say P's in this microphone, to sort of punctuate what Maren was saying about, who should we be concerned about? I mean, are we each other's enemies, or are there other things going on in the world that we need to be together focused on? How many of you watched the Academy Awards on Sunday night? Hardly any. Good. So this is going to be good for you. Joaquin Phoenix, who played the Joker in the movie The Joker, he won his first Academy Award for Best Actor, the most coveted award in all of entertainment. He got the Oscar for Best Actor, and when he came to the stage, he had the world's attention for 5 minutes and was able to say whatever he wanted to say to the whole planet in that moment. And I want you to see what Joaquin Phoenix chose to do with the most important 5 minutes of his life. Roll it, Joe.
And the Oscar goes to Joaquin Phoenix, Joker.
This is the first Oscar and fourth nomination for Joaquin Phoenix.
I think whether we're talking about gender inequality or racism or queer rights or indigenous rights or animal rights, we're talking about the fight against injustice. We're talking about the fight against the belief that one nation, one people, one race, one gender, or one species has the right to dominate, control, and use and exploit another with impunity. I think that we've become very disconnected from the natural world, and many of us, what we're guilty of is an egocentric worldview, the belief that we're the center of the universe. We go into the natural world and we plunder it for its resources. We feel entitled to artificially inseminate a cow, and when she gives birth, we steal her baby, even though her cries of anguish are unmistakable. And then we take her milk that's intended for a calf, and we put it in our coffee and our cereal. Use love and compassion as our guiding principles. We can create, develop, and implement systems of change that are beneficial to all sentient beings and to the environment.
So Joaquin Phoenix, the winner of the Academy Award, chose in his most important 5 minutes of his life to say, "Screw you, dairy farmers." And this is a situation that has been going on in my entire career of being in dairy, and now I'm, just so you guys know, I'm an almond milk producer now instead of a cow milk producer. But they're coming after us too for the bees, we're never going to get away from these guys. But the fact that he elevated this to such a high degree should give us something that we can rally behind and know that we have this in common, right? We know that what we have in common as dairy producers, as farmers, is that we are family people, we are Christian people, we have communities together that we surround ourselves in. We have a Dutch community, a Portuguese community. I'm kind of a mutt. I guess we're in all other breeds community. And that we have this community and that we will be stronger in defense of what's happening in the world if we do it together than if we do it separately. So I encourage you to contemplate and come together on a solution. Can we go back to the PowerPoint, please? Okay, so Maren is going to come back to the stage, and we're going to do Q&A, and then we're going to wrap this thing up. Does that sound good for you guys? We're going to go ahead and pass mics around, so if you guys have a question right now, raise your hand, and someone's going to come up. There's one right there, one right there, right there, right there. Bring a microphone right here. Blue shirt, table number 76, I think. Right there, okay.
I don't see Renee Dieger here right now, but she's got a 2-minute little thing that she needs to read off. My problem with this process, just so you know, is I feel like this whole process took place to see how we could please those without quota. It was not a fair process. This was not conducted to see how we could move forward We had a system in place, the quota program. We were told if we went to a federal order, was going to stay in place and run its course. So you have people that bought quota, sold quota, milked more cows, bought secondaries. You have those of us that stayed with our quota. We milk less than 300 cows. I'm 100% quota. That's a little over $9,100 net a month to me. You're going to put the little dairyman out of business. It's over $100,000 a year for somebody that doesn't want to gloat the market and overflow everything. This wasn't a process to see how we should move forward. This was a process to see how little you can have those with quota take for what they have and go without. I'm really disappointed.
I really appreciate your comments, and I recognize that this is very emotional, very difficult conversation, but I want to just express in response to your comment that to the best of our ability, we invited every single producer in California to come to these meetings. We sent mail, we sent email, we called people, text messages. We invited every single producer to come to every meeting, and we started with a completely blank slate, and we asked people throughout the entire process to express what they wanted to do. And I will also say that at all of these meetings, the majority of the input came from quota holders. It was only on an average about 30% participation by non-quota holders in these meetings. So I'm confident that the results of this process are what was reflected back in a fair and open process.
Yeah, we executed against our charge. Our contract was to pursue alternatives to immediate termination and alternatives to status quo. The ideas that were ultimately presented to you today as a final plan came from you, they were evaluated by you, and ultimately they were selected by the dairy community. I believe that the process that we have followed to elicit your ideas and filter them and select and evaluate the finalists was done according to the highest scientific standards. And on a human level, I understand that this is few issues could be bigger. I understand that.
I have a question on the referendum. When we voted for the federal order, wasn't it if we were in a co-op, didn't the co-op vote? We couldn't vote individually, and this time we can vote individually?
Under a federal order referendum, I believe it is provided for the opportunity for a block vote. In California, under the California statutes, for referendums, there is no possibility of a block vote. So under whatever referendum comes forward in the future, there will be no block vote because it's not an option under California rules. Question in the back?
You got to remember, the co-ops did not vote for the QIP program. The individual producers voted for the QIP program, and that passed by an overwhelming majority. The co-ops voted to enter the federal order, which was independent of QIP.
Any other questions? There's one all the way over here on this side of the room. Is that Dante?
Yeah, thank you, Dino. When we were originally presented a hypothetical March 1st starting date, the time process that it's taken to get to this point has been 8 to 10 months. It was a hypothetical date at March 1st, if we start on this date. That March 1st date now seems to be set in stone, And with all the noise that's happened around the value of quota and what's going to come out of this process over the last 6 to 8 months, most producers that are quota holders have been reluctant to make a move, waiting to see what type of solution was presented today. Now, we've got less than 2 weeks to make a decision on our future. Each one of these producers are looking at this from a different manner, and I believe that the March 1st starting date, I don't know where that date came from and why it got implemented as quickly as it did, but it makes no sense to me whatsoever why we will start a process before an industry-wide acceptance into a program.
So just want to clarify, there will be no changes to RQAs in March 2020. There will be no changes to anything March 2020. For anything that we presented today to go into effect, you will need to affirm that in a referendum. So 2 weeks from now, it's going to be sunny in California, it's probably going to snow in Minnesota, but everything else is going to be the same as it is today. And Dina,
Yeah, so one thing we want to point out is that when we got to the phase 3 meetings, we wanted to have a concrete proposal that we could bring to you today. And you can't have a sunset duration without a beginning time and an end time. And so when we did these surveys, they were in January, they were approximately a month ago, and the data, we tried to elicit the producer community's preferences, and so we elicited them from a start date, which we presented at the meetings, of beginning in March. Do you prefer a sunset that is 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and 7 years? So that sunset duration originated based on the elicitation of producer preferences. So if another way of saying this is that if you wanted a 6-year sunset, it would be kind of like 5 years beginning March of next year. We needed a start date, and in order to be able to have a discussion, be able to move forward and be able to come to you today with a real proposal that was generated by the producer community.
We went around and around on start dates. So this, Matt brings up the important part of that issue, which is that if you're going to calculate what you would accept in a sunset, because it's about a value, right? It's about a dollar value. You have to know where it starts. You have to know where to calculate from. And we talked about going back to the first day of the federal order, and then people would want, a higher value, maybe shorter sunset. We talked about kicking it into some date in the future. But no matter how you looked at it, you had to start with a number, right? And a date, and you have to choose from there. So when we went to create the final proposal, we discussed, how could we change the date? But since that was the date that was offered in the survey, and that is the date that people chose from which they would accept a sunset duration, we did not have an option to change it. And so, we expect we're going to turn this in, and there's going to be hearings, and there's going to be lots of more conversations, and there's plenty of room for amendments and comment and public input on this stuff. This is, this is not the final situation. Okay. Any other questions? Frank? Use the microphone. We know you could talk loud, Frank. This is a big room.
Will this plan eventually proceed using the same exact process that the Secretary and PRB set out for the Stop the Quit petition for a referendum?
We do not know what route the department might take to implement this. We are simply submitting a proposal for an amendment to the QUIP, and we are asking the department to take it to a referendum. We're leaving it in the hands of the department to decide how they're going to do that.
That sounds like you will not be passing around a petition to sign.
We are not collecting signatures to compel the department to hold a referendum. We are submitting a proposal to the department. We're submitting that proposal today. That proposal is coming from the United Dairy Families of California, and we are asking the department to pursue our proposal. And if the department chooses not to pursue our proposal, then we would be compelled to collect signatures. Any other questions? Anyone? I see any hands? You guys are going to make this easy on us? Come on. Over here? I see one over there. Okay. Is that Rodney Camper? All right, keep it short, Rodney.
That's not possible.
All right.
So just to follow up on Frank's question here, you know, we've had quota around for just over 50 years now, and during that time there's been numerous times where either a producer group or maybe some of the processors or co-ops would petition for a make allowance hearing or petition to get a few more cents on class 1 to spread it around. You know, this is very unique here. This is the first time, to my knowledge, in 50 years that actually went the route, which has always been available, to go get 25% of producers to sign a petition pushing some issue. So, Frank, this is very common to request something in a petition, just like these make allowance or whatever hearings have been asked for over the years. Some have been granted, some have been denied. It's very common to not have to run around and get 25% of the producers to sign something just to talk about it. So it's more common than this new thing we got going.
Thank you. That is correct, Rodney. We consider that we've taken this thing through a process, an open and transparent process, an industry-directed process, an industry-derived proposal, and we believe the department, there would be some value if the department were just to take our proposal and run with it. If they don't, we'll reconsider. Any other questions? Okay, in the back.
What is taking place next? Are we going to get envelopes from CDFA and vote, or get percentages of the milk per dairy farm? What's the next step?
Well, the very next step is we're going to submit our proposal to the department. Then our assumption, our guess would be that the department will implement a hearing process. We don't know exactly how they would do that in terms of what form of a hearing it would come to, but if you consider what they've done in the past, let's just say under other types of petitions for amendments to, the marketing order or other parts of the Gonzales Milk Pooling Act, they announce a date for a hearing. They ask for alternative proposals. So if you don't like this proposal, you're free to create your own proposal. I'm pretty sure that you're going to be able to submit your own proposal to the department prior to our proposal being, heard or even a part of any kind of hearing. And then they're going to have a hearing, and then the department makes a decision. At this point, once we submit the proposal, it's completely out of our hands, right? We relinquish all control of this process now to the department, and we're going to be kind of in the same position as everyone else, wondering what comes next. Okay. Any other questions?
I'm coming.
So the proposal is for a 5-year buyout. That's what you're going to recommend?
It's a 5-year sunset.
Sunset. So in this process, what I was trying to get at earlier was, is that truly the concept that the quota holders want? Or is that the road of less fight from those that don't have quota?
I have the exact answer for that question.
And earlier you said to vote on what you think is right, and it shouldn't affect your pocketbook. That's not the right, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to do what it's going to cost you money. You want to do what you think is right for the industry. If this is what's right for the industry, I would like to challenge all of those without quota to rent their land for 10 years to someone else, and then at the end of 10 years, that person owns the land, and see if they would agree to that.
Okay, so the answer to your question is that this is the proposal that came out of the process. The only way we're going to know if this is the proposal that everyone wants is when they vote for it. So our process requires us to take this proposal that was created by you and bring it to the department, which we're doing. Now it's up to you to decide. That's where we're at. Okay?
Producers that own no quota produce about 36% of the milk in state. Sunset as a concept was found to be acceptable by 88% of the milk solids as a state, as a concept. The 5-year sunset, the duration was determined based on what the quota holders expressed and what quota producers that own no quota expressed. So we summarized those answers into a single number because we cannot come with two numbers, one for quota holders, the other one for the others. So we tried to the best of our abilities, without any biases, to scientifically aggregate the survey results to a final proposal. That's all we did. We did not deviate one iota from what the survey responses were.
I just think it's important to reiterate that this proposal is not the idea of the United Dairy Families of California or any of its members, the board members. None of them came up with this idea. It's also not the idea of Marin and Matt. This idea came from the results of surveys and input that was collected during this process. So, this is truly the industry's decision, not any individual on the stage or any individual involved in the process. Are there any final questions? And then we'll move on to the last little closing thing here.
Is Stop QAP going to endorse this proposal?
Hey, Craig.
And second part of that question is, if they are not, if they're going to continue to push to terminate quota, who's losing in this situation?
Hey, Craig, are you going to endorse it? There's your answer. Okay. We invited Stop Quip and the co-ops and everyone else to participate with us in the development of a plan. The dairy families now are moving forward as an organization, submitting it to them. This is a dynamic and changing situation. I fully expect that there's going to be people who supported the dairy families that are no longer going to support it, and I also suspect that there's going to be people who've been supporting Stop Quip who are no longer going to support them. I think there's going to be a little transition here, and we're not done yet. I mean, we still have to go through whatever the department brings us. So the fun's not over. There's lots more fighting to do. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to thank you guys. So let's give these guys a hand for the work that they've put in and the investment of their lives that they've contributed to the dairy industry. And it really, truly was a contribution by these guys. I know they got paid, but I promise you that we spent more time talking on the phone and doing this stuff that they're probably working below minimum wage, and we're probably going to get screwed by California over wage issues. So where did Corinne go? Okay, the last thing I want to tell you guys is that we are going to be holding, we being the United Dairy Families of California, are going to hold 8 additional meetings like this one, where we're going to be, outreaching to as many people as we possibly can. They are going to be held in all of the regions, of California, run by the Regional Dairy Families Committee chairs. And I want to introduce to you Corinne Madison. We were going along this process, and we thought we were doing pretty good, but then we discovered we didn't have a millennial. So we went out and got us a millennial. And here she is. Corinne comes to us previously working in the National Affairs Division of the California State Farm Bureau Federation, doing dairy policy issues at the state and national level. And she has come over to the United Dairy Families of California and will be steering the activities and participating with you all moving forward. So you're going to see her at all of these regional meetings, and she's going to be calling you and trying to understand what your needs are and where you are on this issue. So Corinne, you want to just come and say hi?
Thank you, Dino. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Wish me luck in my new endeavor, trying to represent all of you the best that I can. On this screen, as Dino mentioned, oh, actually, do we have the PowerPoint? Oh, thank you. We will be holding regional meetings around the state to continue this conversation and to answer any questions that the dairy producers that aren't here today might have. Those dates and the regions are on the screen. Feel free to take pictures. It's also posted on the website, and we do have Eventbrite events created for each one. Unfortunately, we are still trying to sort the details out for Region 9, but we suspect that it will be in the Chino area, so stay tuned for more information. And we will also send out some email blasts so you can continue to receive this information. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dino. Thank you.
Okay, so now that mostly everyone's left, we can tell you what's really going on. All right, what's really going on is that today we're submitting this proposal to the department, and we're going to wait and see what happens. And we hope that all of you will participate in whatever comes next. Make sure you're signed up on our email our email list. Come and check the website. We will do the best we can to keep you guys constantly informed about what's going on with the lawsuit, with the Chapter 3.5 petition, and with the submission of our proposal. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for attending, and we'll see you sometime soon. Thanks.